Hi, everyone. This is Isa Betancourt, your host of the Bug Scope. Welcome to this week's special Earth Day edition of the Bug Scope. I'm excited to bring on our guest in one moment. Hello, Pablo. Welcome. Hope you guys are all having a great Earth Day, hugging all the trees that you see, taking deep breaths of fresh air and stopping to smell all the flowers. So yeah, happy Earth Day. Hi, Marion. Hi, Linda. Hope you guys are doing well and appreciating this beautiful planet a little extra today. Hi, David. Good to see you as well. So, and Frank, hello. So yeah, without further ado, I will bring on our guest and introduce you to her. If you've been with the Bug Scope for a while, you may have met Autumn in the chat over on Periscope as she's joined me for some of our past broadcasts. There was one particular that I remember with fondness where Autumn helped identify one of the mosquitoes live during the broadcasts as we had it underneath a dissection scope, which was really fun. So yeah, Autumn graduated with her bachelor's in biological sciences from Rowan University, and she's currently attending University of Florida for her master's degree in entomology with a certificate in medical and veterinary entomology. She's a mosquito control entomologist in southern New Jersey and is responsible for the surveillance of mosquitoes in relation to both population levels and disease transmission. She also does some tick surveillance, and she lives with her wonderful husband and 2 kids, and as well as her dogs, 3 cats, and a rabbit. So hello, Autumn. Thanks for joining us today. So great to have you.
Hi, Isa. Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to answer everyone's questions about mosquitoes.
Yeah. So, to start us off here, will you tell us what is a mosquito? What makes an insect a mosquito?
Well, a mosquito is actually a fly. It is in the same order as flies, but mosquitoes, they, as we know, have a proboscis, which is what they use to bite and also to drink nectar. And that, along with the hairs and scales that they have on their wings, that's what makes them so unique, and that's what makes them a mosquito.
Awesome. And I will also say cheers. So great to have you here today. Let me find the uh, camera. So here I'm cheersing with a cup full of, oh, here, let me turn it sideways so the letters aren't there. Cup full of mosquito larvae in honor of our guest and her
I'm going to
expertise today.
suggest not taking a sip of that, but
Okay. I do have a cup of water over here in case I start to get thirsty, but I will try not to confuse the 2 containers. Um, yes. Yes, cool. So yeah, cheers. And maybe later on we can, depending on how we progress, we can take a look at them under the scope over here.
perfect.
And yeah. So we have a question right off the bat from Meron. If you want to jump right into that, saying, is it fair to, well, sorry, before we do that, actually, I would like to ask how, tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got into the world of mosquitoes.
So I got into the world of mosquito control the same way that most people do, and that's accidentally.
Nice.
I was actually fresh out of high school, and I took a seasonal position with the local mosquito control district. And I did that all through college during the summers. And then I graduated high school. I went off and I entered the world of actually molecular biology, and I was in medical research. And then an opening came up for a biologist with the mosquito control division. And I said, okay, well, that's closer to home. Let's try it out. I interviewed, and there I was. And I took the position, and now it's been 12 years since the full-time status started. So it's been a really good ride so far, and I love it. And it's strange how most folks get into mosquito control, but I think a lot of people have a very similar story where you go and you help out and then you just get stuck in there. But it's a good stuck.
Yeah, and there was that piece like from a year or so ago about through WHYY where they chatted with you, and it's a whole story that talks about in some parts your love for mosquitoes.
Yes, so that was with Alan Yu, and it was a year ago in May that that story came out. We actually did the interviews in March, but it was right before COVID. So it was
Mm.
supposed to have came out in March, but COVID interrupted that, which was fine. But it was just odd because it was the last time I was with other people without a mask on.
Oh, wow.
And I can
Good timing.
actually I haven't oh shoot, I didn't touch it, but um here's an image of the mosquito that I was talking about. If I can
Okay.
click it.
Oh, yeah, if you click it, it'll come up
In
on
the
the screen.
story. So
Yeah.
in the story with Alan, this is a larvae of the mosquito that I was talking about, which is Toxorynchides rutilis, which is also known as the elephant mosquito. And she is a big, beautiful mosquito that is colored brightly and never takes a blood meal. She's actually carnivorous as a larvae, like you can see here. She's the large larvae that's eating the Aedes albopictus larvae. And they are our friends. They're predatory as larvae, and then as adults, they only drink nectar.
Wow.
And
So
I wonder if
it's
I can pull up a picture.
your friendly neighborhood mosquito.
Yeah,
I wish I had one so we could put it in here and watch what happens.
they are voracious, so there wouldn't be many larvae left afterward.
Wow. Um, it what is their
I
range?
don't know how well this will come up. So you
Okay.
can find the Toxorynchides through most parts of the United States. There are two subspecies within the United States, and then there are also other Toxorynchides species that are worldwide, and they all share similar characteristics, such as being predatory as larvae. Let's see if this works.
Oh yeah, let me
Oh
make you
shoot.
bigger. I'll make you bigger.
Okay.
And also, oh yeah, there we go. Cute. Look at that little proboscis, just like any bee fly or butterfly or moth, looking for some nectar to sip on. Yeah.
I mean, the picture doesn't even do it justice. She's got beautiful green and blue and yellow scales on her,
Mm,
and we know her as a good mosquito, so we do love her. And there are actually scientists, and we in our lab are trying to raise them as a biological control.
that's really cool. Wait, so what's the common name again?
The elephant mosquito.
Okay. And okay, cool. I'm gonna put it on the screen so people can see the common name uh, at least, and then you can look it up that way. Cool. So one way to control mosquitoes is with
With
mosquitoes.
other mosquitoes.
So there we go, right off the bat. So yeah, Linda here in the chat is saying, I never knew there were non-obnoxious mosquitoes. Great news. Yeah.
Yeah, and really Toxorynchides rutilis isn't it's my favorite, and I'm a little biased, but there are other non-obnoxious mosquitoes as well. And there are several non-biting species, and luckily a lot of the mosquitoes, the large majority of them, although they can be annoying, most of them don't spread disease. There are just the unlucky handful that do. And those are the ones that we really target when it comes to vector control.
Cool. Um, offhand, do you know about how many species in the world there are of mosquitoes?
In the world, I don't know a real number. I know that it's
Yeah,
greater
sure.
than 3,000. And
Okay,
in the
yeah.
United States, there are about 800 species. In New Jersey, we have about 64 species.
Okay. Cool. Wow. And I'm guessing the ones that bite us are maybe the most common because they have a lot of hosts to prey upon when it comes to blood meals? Or like how
So
specific are they when it comes to
they can
what
be
they like,
very
who they like to bite?
specific. They can be very specific. So I have mm, I have an shoot, I should have
It's
added a
possible to
lot more pictures.
it's possible to share your screen if you are interested in doing that.
This mosquito here is actually biting my arm. That's Aedes canadensis, which is a type of floodwater mosquito. And she's pretty voracious, but she will bite basically anyone or anything that breathes nearby. But there are other species that are extremely picky. For example, Aedes albopictus, which a lot of people will be familiar with, which is the Asian tiger mosquito, the black and white stripes. They are very particular for humans. They love to bite humans.
Mhm.
Same with Aedes aegypti, which is their sister species. They love to, their habitat is containers, and especially artificial containers like tires and tarps and kids' toys and bird
Mm.
baths and gutters. And if you don't drain that water, then they will hatch out by the millions. And they love to bite humans.
Wait,
And they especially attack ankles. They love to fly low.
uh-huh. So is that what you were saying is probably in my cup of mosquito larvae?
Aedes albopictus, like they can overwinter in cooler climates, and they do, but they will typically start hatching later in the year. So in your cup is more than likely Aedes japonicus, which is
Okay.
more cold tolerant, but is a very
Okay.
similar species.
Cool. I feel itchy now, says Zach. Good. Glad you're with us here. On topic. Okay. So going off of those things, Maron's asking how they detect CO2, or is it true they detect CO2 to find their victims?
It's true. So when you breathe, you let out CO2, and then you breathe in, which does not let out CO2. So it creates like a wavelength. So you're breathing out, you're breathing in, you're breathing out, you're breathing in. So they follow those peaks and valleys of the CO2 back to find you. And if someone respires more quickly, your wavelengths are quicker. And occasionally it seems like mosquitoes can find someone that breathes at a faster rate a little bit quicker.
Wow, that's really interesting. I did not know that. Are there other factors that come into their preferences? Because I definitely get that a lot with people. It's like, oh, like they don't care about me, but they love to bite my sister. Things like
There
that.
are, and there have been many studies. It still seems like it's kind of up in the air as to really nailing down what it is that they like, but it seems like a higher blood pressure tends
Mm.
to attract mosquitoes a little more. And people with specific chemical makeup, they are more attractive. And I've also read several studies that actually indicate that if you have stinky feet, then you might be more attractive to the mosquitoes.
All right, everyone, go wash your feet. Wow, that's so interesting and funny. It's also like whose idea was it to test that, like, as a variable?
That's a good question.
And who measured how stinky the feet were, and how is that measured? Zach says, "I thought they're attracted to heat, body heat."
They're also attracted to heat, but it's a combination of the things. I mean, mosquitoes are also attracted to light, and one of the traps that we use for population surveillance, that's the only attractant that is on the trap is a 25-watt
Um,
light bulb, and we get tons of mosquitoes to those. So
Oh, interesting.
Depending on the species and their voracity, sometimes I don't think that you even need to have blood in you for them to try to bite you.
Wow. Whatever it takes to get that blood meal. So, what do they use the blood meal for? And it's only the females, right? That
Yes,
seek blood.
only the females bite of the species that do take a blood meal.
Right.
There are several
That's fair.
species that gain enough protein as a larvae that they do not need to take a blood meal. But those that do, they digest the blood meal and utilize that protein in order to create their eggs. And once they have digested and rested, then they are then called gravid, so basically pregnant, and then they're ready to go lay their eggs. And I have a good picture of Aedes albopictus eggs that I have from
Oh, yeah. I'll make it bigger. One sec.
thanks. And this is from a collection that I made. Each one of those little black specks is an Aedes albopictus egg.
Wow.
And when you leave a container outside, this is what the walls of the container would look like if an Aedes albopictus were to find it and find it suitable as a habitat for her babies.
Wow. That's definitely surprising to me because I never really thought that much about mosquito eggs before. Like I did hear that, oh, they'll leave their eggs in containers that are left outside and things like that. But for some reason I thought that they would be white. And so it's
Well, they're
interesting.
actually white when they are laid, but
Uh-huh.
after time,
Mhm.
they sclerotize and they get darker, so they harden,
Wow.
and then they turn black.
I can't help but wonder, I mean, is that to camouflage? Because I would totally think it's just soil on the side of a container and not think that
Yeah,
they're eggs. So
yeah, most people do.
I'm definitely motivated to experiment with that
I
a bit.
actually had to yell at my mom. She had a container outside, and
Oh, yeah.
there was eggs all along the edge of the container,
Oh,
and I'm like, "These are
no.
mosquito eggs. You have to scrub your containers."
Whoa. I probably would have thought that it was just maybe like a water line. Wait, is it above the water or at the water line?
So this is actually seed germination paper that I use to collect Albopictus eggs. And
Mhm.
but if it were just a regular, let's say a dog bowl that you leave outside for water, it would be right at or just above or just at the water line because they don't want their eggs to completely dry out. They want it to remain humid, but these types of eggs can dry out and there's no problem with that. They can dry out and remain dry, and then when they're reflooded, that's when they hatch.
Wow. That's interesting too because I feel like I hypothesize that it must be some sort of camouflage thing that like because
I
also if
would
I
say
saw
so.
yeah, because if I saw like darkness or debris along the water edge, it's like that happens anyway because as,
And it's
like a bathtub ring sort of situation.
yeah. And in a natural container such as a tree hole,
Uh-huh.
that color egg, you would never see it inside of a dark tree hole.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Um, and Frank is asking, what scale is the egg? Are the eggs in the picture, or is it the picture?
I took it with my phone and it's just an egg paper that I pulled out of an oviposition cup, which is a type of trap that we use to collect eggs. Um, they're very tiny.
Yeah.
But if you were to look at the edge of a container and if there were mosquito eggs, it would look dirty. You if you look very closely, you'd be able to see the little oblong shape of an egg, but they're very difficult to see by the naked eye. But
So
there's no magnification on that photo besides just my phone zoom.
yeah, so like the specks lower down are maybe a single egg, and then up
Yeah,
higher
so
are
each
clusters.
little dot is an egg. Yeah, some of them are clusters, but some of them are singular specks.
Okay. Wait. Maron's saying, first of all, thanks, David, for the Appreciate Award. And then Maron's saying, I had to drink water in the mountains full of larvae long time ago.
Oh,
Wow. What were you up to?
well, extra protein.
Yeah. When I was in Borneo back in 2014 and 15, the orangutans would pick up the pitcher plants, and the pitcher plants would sometimes have mosquito larvae in them. So
Hmm.
I feel like they probably got some extra nutrients from
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So how do the larvae breathe? Is the
Mosquito
question.
larvae have, and I'll pull up that picture again. They
Yeah.
have basically a snorkel that they use to breathe. And as you can see on both the larger larvae in this picture and the smaller larvae, there's a tube that breaks the surface tension of the water, and that's how they breathe. So they are aquatic creatures, but they breathe air. So basically, they're snorkeling.
Yeah. And I'll see if I can bring up I'll see about using my phone as a second camera to show you guys under the scope over here some of the larvae. I think that might be fun. Um,
And real
but,
quick for David, rat-tailed maggots are actually different. Rat-tailed maggots are dronefly larvae.
uh,
A lot of times, mosquito larvae are also called wrigglers.
that makes sense. uh, so can you explain their behavior as larvae to us? Like, so I noticed that when I went to go scoop up the ones that I have in this cup, they wriggled a bunch and then they also went lower down into the container.
Yeah, so that's a survival mechanism. And usually, when larvae see a shadow come up over whatever vessel they're in, whether it be a natural habitat or an artificial habitat, they sound. So they go lower to the bottom of the water, and it's a survival mechanism. And
Mm.
while they're in the water, they actually have bristles in the front of their head, and they wiggle their bristles like this, and they eat particles in the water, and that's how they
Whoa.
feed as larvae.
Whoa. And what do they eat?
They eat bacteria and like unicellular organisms, and I've seen them nibble on leaves and fish food, and I mean they just kind of filter feed as they're in there, and just whatever comes in is probably good enough. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's BTI, and that's because we put it there to kill them.
Yeah. What does BTI stand for? Is it or
BTI is Bacillus thuringiensis israelensis. I butchered that. I can never say that word
all good?
correctly, but it's the scientific name for a type of pesticide that we use, but it is naturally derived from a soil bacterium, and it is toxic to mosquito larvae,
Mm,
and it's pretty specific to mosquito larvae.
mhm. Yeah. So sounds delicious, says Zach. Um, what's it called? Um, what's it called? That's maybe I need to get some so I can put it into the bin that I have of water out front. You can do a
Yeah,
live
I mean,
demonstration.
it's available for purchase over the counter, and a lot of people are familiar with it and know it as mosquito dunks. They are the little mosquito donuts that you can buy at the hardware store. But
Mm,
most parts of the country, there is free mosquito control through your government entities. So if you're having an issue with mosquitoes, it's best to reach out first. And then if you can't get help, then go ahead and try to help yourself. But it's best to leave it to the experts. And David, yes, that's correct.
here, I'll share it to the screen.
That's the word I butchered.
All good. Um, cool. And like what happened? Well, I guess if you're having a problem with mosquitoes, Like when you reach out to the local government, they'll help make a plan, or like what happens next?
It really depends on the state and the district, but in New Jersey, at least, it is actually statutorily mandated that every county have a mosquito control either commission or a department.
Wow.
And our job is to keep an eye on the populations and the disease that may be circulating in our areas. And we want to control those populations to try to avoid as much disease spillover as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, some areas are a statewide organization, some areas might be large districts. It really depends on the state and the area, but I can speak really only for New Jersey. I know that I think Florida is countywide as well, and also California, but I'm not 100% sure elsewhere.
Okay. That's cool. And I feel like that must be really important with mosquito control because of all of the work. And I feel like there's a lot of coordinated effort that goes into managing populations.
Oh yeah, and there's a good reason that we're here. I mean, if it wasn't for organized mosquito control, mosquito-borne disease would be a lot more rampant than it is. Luckily, a lot of people come to me and ask, why are you guys even here? There's no mosquito disease in this area. And while I'm grateful that they think that, that's not true. So there are many mosquito-borne diseases in the United States that, I mean, we see them every year, year after year, whether it be West Nile virus, Eastern equine encephalitis, St. Louis encephalitis. There are, I mean, lots of them that you may not even have even heard of. And so, for example, Eastern equine encephalitis is a very severe infection and kills a third of the people that get it.
Wow, that's
So it's
scary.
very important work.
Yeah. Wow. Um, oh, Frank is asking, are most mosquitoes a disease vector or only a few?
It's really only a few. Most mosquitoes are either not a problem, which that's the small minority, or just a pain in the butt nuisance. And then there's another small minority that are disease vectors. But as Isa said earlier, those disease vectors can be very abundant, and that's part of the issue. And one of the most severe ones, at least in the northern part of the United States, is Culex pipiens. And in the south, it's Culex quinquefasciatus, which are a very similar species, and they are the primary spreader of West Nile virus. And they're very abundant, and their habitat is polluted water, and a lot of times it's like storm drains in like a neighborhood.
Yeah. So, since we're live and people join at any time, I just want to do a reintroduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Isa Betancourt. You are here with us on the Bug Scope, and we have our special guest expert here, Autumn Angelus, with us. She has her bachelor's in biological sciences from Rowan and is currently attending University of Florida for her master's degree in entomology with a certificate in medical and veterinary entomology. She is a mosquito control entomologist in southern New Jersey, responsible for the surveillance of mosquitoes in relation to both population levels and disease transmission. And I'm so happy to have her here today, especially for Earth Day, because there are many different ways, many different approaches that people take to control mosquitoes, and some of them are more targeted on mosquito populations and some of them are less targeted. And so I am curious to hear from you, like the different ways that you guys go about controlling mosquitoes.
Well, most mosquito control programs, and as they should, utilize what is called an integrated pest management approach. And basically that means that we take many different approaches toward trying to control the problem, which are mosquitoes. And some of those cogs in the wheel of integrated pest management might be habitat elimination. So we can do that through dumping and draining containers, or we can do that through water management. So basically, that would mean maintaining ditches or drainage areas to allow for fish to enter the area or to allow the water to move more easily. This can also mean biological control, so the use of fish in, say, abandoned swimming pools to eat the larvae that would otherwise run rampant. This can also, however, mean use of chemical control. And sometimes when every other approach is tried and is not a feasible option, then we have to go with the chemical approach, especially if it is a disease issue.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah. So you're mentioning putting fish in abandoned swimming pools, like basically pondifying,
Yeah.
adding to the ecosystem, which is pretty cool to think about. David, I think commenting on earlier was saying interesting in the UK, Culex pipiens apparently rarely bites people, and then also what number per specific area size is considered catastrophic, and then
the number per area is really dependent on what area you're in and how the people in the area sorry, my dog just got on my lap, are able to tolerate mosquitoes. So we have some areas that there can be hundreds per night and nobody even calls or complains because it's like, oh, no big deal, we're used to it. And then there's other areas where they get bit once and they're calling and they're like, these mosquitoes are out of control. But as far as a disease problem and it's an issue where that would come into play, that really doesn't have anything to do with the number per se, because there are so many other things that come into play where it really just depends on lots of other parts,
factors,
moving parts that would come into whether or not that's an issue.
right?
So it doesn't necessarily mean the number.
You guys are really focused on the risk of disease, which is like very dangerous.
Well, for many that don't know, the capital of the United States is actually in Washington, D.C., because the early, well, I guess I would say the early leaders of the country feared a yellow fever outbreak that occurred in the 1790s. It killed lots of people and was a severe issue. And because they didn't know what was causing it or how it was happening, their best approach was to run away from it. So they moved the capital of the country from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C.
Wow, that's why.
Yeah.
Amazing. You can thank the mosquitoes for that. That's pretty wild. I did not know that. I wonder what percentage of the population know that. I mean, this is a different fly, but I also heard that what was it? Either the Declaration of Independence or like some of the Constitution was finished more rapidly than otherwise because a bunch of horse flies flew into the room and started biting them and they got tired of them.
That's possible.
Insects influencing history.
That's for sure.
one swarm at a time. Yeah. So Zach here is asking, are mosquitoes beneficial to us in any way, i.e. medical studies, etc.?
So people do ask that every once in a while, and it's hard to quantify. I feel like they're super beneficial because I am employed.
There you go.
But they are actually pollinators. Believe it or not, all mosquitoes, whether they are male or female, do drink nectar. And as they are drinking nectar, they can pollinate plants. I do know of one plant, it's a type of orchid, and it is actually pollinated only by mosquitoes. So
Wow.
without that mosquito that drinks nectar from that orchid would no longer exist.
Wow, that's cool. Um, Very cool. Yeah. All right. I have a question too that there was our guest from a couple weeks ago also had a photo like this, and I wanted to show with everyone else too that here. Oops. This photo.
Yeah, that's my arm.
Yeah. And before we leave the pollination topic, because David's commenting too, is chocolate mosquito pollinated? Chocolate's pollinated by some sort of midge. So same area on the phylogenetic tree, but and midges are a group. I think some of them are affected by the mosquito dunks too, but generally,
Probably, yes. They're
generally
pretty close.
yeah, but generally, from my understanding of the research, the dunks are pretty specific compared to other methods, which is awesome. Frank is saying send more horseflies to speed up political progress. Yep. And the army of mosquitoes. Yep, too many mosquitoes. Uh, okay. So yeah, so Autumn, well, there's also the question here, how do we differentiate between male and female mosquitoes? And then I would love for you to talk about the photograph here.
Yeah, of course. Male mosquitoes typically have a very fluffy antennae on their head, whereas the females are not so fluffy. They also tend to have, hello, Tara. They also tend to have a hairier pelt, and their proboscis is actually unable to bite, so it's usually shaped a little differently. And a lot of times people don't end up seeing the males because they don't really care so much for you. So typically, if you're finding a mosquito on you, it's a female.
Cool.
And the photo, so every year we like to do insecticide resistance studies just to make sure that the chemicals that we are using are still working and are working to their full capacity, because we don't want to lose any of those tools that we have, because really there's only a handful of mosquito control chemicals that are registered by the EPA. So to do those tests, I have to raise mosquitoes, and I have to hatch the eggs like you saw on that paper earlier, and then rear them out to adults. And then what I do is I use those adults to test and make sure that those pesticides are working. And with the leftover mosquitoes, I like to keep a colony on hand. And after several generations, then they become a susceptible colony. So we would know that those mosquitoes would definitely die against that pesticide, whereas the wild caught ones is not so sure. So they're the ones that we have to test. But the susceptible colony, the colony that we keep in the lab, would be susceptible regardless of what genetics are out in the field. So we can use that as a control against what we're testing for. And in this picture, I'm feeding the colony so that they will lay eggs.
Nice. So you can make more mosquitoes in the lab
In the
for
lab.
for for ultimately for mosquito control purposes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. Yeah. Did you know that when you signed up for the job? Did you ever
Well,
imagine yourself that you'd be here feeding mosquitoes like
honestly,
this?
this almost let's see, the tick program and the insecticide resistance testing program, I actually started. So
Oh,
I
wow.
definitely did not know it was coming, but I'm very glad to do it because I want to be able to make sure that everything that we're doing is working and that we can continue to do it and that it will continue to work.
Yeah. Long-term sustainability, which is really important. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so are you still feeding mosquitoes so you're still regularly every now and then feeding mosquitoes like this? With,
I had an issue with my colony about a year ago, and
okay.
they completely just one day I went in the lab and they were all dead, and I could not
Aw.
figure out why. Yeah, so I actually had a collapse. So I'm hoping that this year when I get more eggs,
Mhm.
I can start over.
Does your colony have a name? Do you name your colony or something like that?
No.
Okay.
Although Zach said
Yeah.
they look like sprinkles, so maybe I'll call them chocolate sprinkles.
There you go. Yeah. Um, yeah, and so I suppose in this case, since you're raising them, you probably like where it's harder to encounter them in the wild, here the ones that aren't visiting your arm might be the ones that are males or not um hungry females. Or not, is it hungry the right term though? Do you guys use they're hungry for blood or is it something else if they're using it for their eggs?
I guess we don't really distinguish
Just
that.
wondering.
I guess we could say that colloquialism just because it is attractive to people, it makes them think like, oh, I'm going to be bitten. So
Yeah,
we could use it especially for public education.
sure. Yeah. Oh, here, Maron's suggesting bloodthirsty. So they
Yeah,
do
that's good.
drink it up. Yeah.
Think of them as little vampires.
Yep. And another question, is there an easier way to feed them? Is there no
Some
easier way to feed them?
some labs have uh, elaborate and expensive setups that allow for them to feed their mosquitoes with pig's blood or other animals, but that requires permits and care of the other animals, and the other lab setups require expensive gadgets and purchasing of pig's blood and this and that. It's just honestly easier and cheaper for me to just use my arm. And honestly, as long as I've been feeding my Aedes albopictus, it doesn't bother me anymore. And so, for example, that photo there, I may have gotten some red bumps, and by an hour later, they're gone. So it doesn't even really bother me. I've been desensitized to it.
Wow. Wow. And it doesn't hurt you when they are biting you either.
No,
Actually, Zach asked a question earlier on about feeling them when they bite. Some species, I feel like, does it vary among species too?
that definitely varies among species. So that species there, Aedes albopictus, you hardly notice that they're there. They are very stealthy. There are other species such as Seraphora ciliata, and I want everybody to go look that up.
Okay.
I
Wait,
wish,
what is it?
how can I, Seraphora ciliata, can I like type that
Oh,
in?
you can type it into the chat, and you can try using the share screen option if you want to try that at the bottom.
Oh, let's try. Well, anyway, this mosquito is huge.
Okay.
And it's very common after a flood water. I think it'll just go to you, Isa.
Oh, thanks. Oh yeah, if you click for future reference, if you click that little lock button, it'll
Uh-huh.
open up and send to everybody.
Oh, oops, I'm
So
sorry.
no, it's okay. You're not familiar with the platform,
Oh,
so
shoot. I did stuff. Okay, thank you. So
Yeah.
yeah, this is a huge mosquito. They are a floodwater species. They hatch out in giant numbers and they are gigantic. And you definitely feel them. That you can
Mm,
hear them coming and they will chase you.
yeah. Here, I'll share the picture from Wikipedia onto the broadcast in in one moment. Um, here, yeah, and I'm guessing they're like when I think about the mosquitoes and how they bite and how you feel them or don't feel them. Like I think about how it's probably advantageous to them if we don't feel them, but then it's advantageous to us if we do feel them. So I wonder if there's some sort of
Yeah,
arms race there that's going on. Um,
probably. I mean,
let's
some
see.
species too. I think the ones that are yeah, that's a great picture. There are some species that are very anthropophilic, so they love to bite humans. They're the ones that you tend to not feel. And that's probably because they co-evolved to bite us. Whereas some of these other species that we do feel, maybe a bird would not feel, or a bear, or whatever other animal they may be biting. It may not matter if they feel them. So like a deer, if they're biting their legs, a deer might not be able to smack them or shoo them off like we could.
Hmm. That makes sense. All fully grown mosquitoes have wings? Question mark. Ask.
Yes, of course. They
Yeah.
are flies and they do have two pairs of wings. And
Okay.
as adults, they all have wings, unless, of course, there's a genetic issue.
Yeah. Or a new species that we have not yet discovered, because there's always an exception in biology, it seems.
That's true.
uh, David's asking some question mark all mosquitoes make that high pitched whining noise in flight. Is the sound frequency species specific? Basically, I just want something easier than keying them out for ID.
Yeah, I mean, actually, they are species specific, and uh, there is technology out there. I think it's actually Biogents that's working on a trap that as the mosquito flies through, the sound is picked up, and the trap can identify the mosquito based on the frequency of the wing beat. And another
Wow.
interesting fact is that female mosquito frequency, the wing beat frequency, changes after mating. So the males
Wow.
know which females have mated and have not mated based on their wing beat frequency.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, do they only mate once then?
Yes, they only mate.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah.
And they will actually store the sperm so they can lay multiple clutches of eggs, but they have only mated once.
Oh, okay. Are they because they only mate once, does that mean that they're really picky about the male?
I've actually read some studies that they can be picky about their male. Um, I think that's pretty new interest though, so they were
Yeah.
still learning a lot about that, but it seems to have a lot to do with fitness, so size and health of the males.
Okay. I wonder I guess it's I'm curious too about like how what senses they're using to determine the
Hmm.
health and fitness of the male. So if it's size, then I guess visual perhaps, or maybe the sound of the male, the way it flies, or chemicals or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I read something about smell as well, or smell in a relative sort of way.
Chemicals, yeah,
Yeah.
pheromones, things like that. Cool. That makes sense if they're using chemicals to find their prey or to find blood meal, I mean. Not we're not prey, we're just a blood meal.
Right.
So
Sometimes it feels
speaking
that way. There
yeah,
have
it
been
does.
there have been instances where in some areas where the mosquito season is super short and the mosquitoes all tend to hatch out at one time, like can happen in Alaska. Those mosquitoes can congregate in such numbers on such as baby moose. So they can actually insanguinate those poor baby moose, so completely drain them of all of their blood. Well, not all of their blood, but enough of the
Yeah,
blood that it kills them.
to cause
So
enough.
it's possible, and even in the
Oh,
United States without mosquito control, I would have no. Well, I mean, Alaska's the United States, but in the contiguous United States, I would imagine that if we didn't have mosquito control in some areas, floodwater mosquitoes would hatch off in such numbers that small animals or baby or sick animals, that could happen to them as well. I have no doubt in my mind.
wow. Wait, sorry, to go back a little bit, what do you guys do to deal with the floodwaters? You add fish and
So depending on the situation, if typically we don't add fish to floodwater because then the floodwater
it's
dries
temporary.
down.
Okay.
But a lot of times with floodwater, chemical control is the only way that we can get
Okay.
rid of those mosquitoes. And we usually have to do it pretty quickly because floodwater mosquitoes tend to go through
Mm,
their life cycle and hatch off pretty quick.
yeah,
So a lot of times we'll use mineral oil on the top of the water, which prevents them from being able to breathe. So they can't break
the surface.
the surface tension of the water. So then they actually suffocate.
Interesting. Cool. Um, can't, we have a question. They can't survive in seawater, question mark?
Actually, there are saltwater and brackish water species that prefer saltwater. So yes, they can. They
Cool.
are everywhere. Don't think that there's any water that they're not going to be in.
Uh-huh.
Seawater, I mean specifically like the ocean, they're not going to be in the ocean, but up in the areas of the marsh, on the edges of the ocean and the edges of a bay, they're going to be loaded with saltwater mosquitoes, such as Aedes sollicitans.
Oh, so there are mosquitoes that are specialized for salt water.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Cool. Um, cool. And then also, comment here, mosquitoes trapped in ambers millions of years ago look very similar to what we have now. Why why haven't they changed much, or have they not changed much?
They
Oh, and
don't need to.
there
They don't
you
need
go.
to. They're so successful that they don't really need to change. And I mean, the ones that were found in amber are definitely different species, so they have changed some. They've become more specialized. But like I said, they don't really need to because they do a great job at what they do.
Yeah, yeah. All right. I'm gonna see if I can switch and show some of the larvae that I have here under the scope. And because to do
Awesome.
that, I'm gonna have to do a little. I'm gonna mute. I have to mute through my. I haven't perfected this yet, but I'm gonna mute
Okay.
here, mute and uh, silence my computer as I switch over to my phone. So one moment. Um, right. I'll bring the camera on the screen
Cool.
too. And my cat, no, my cat's trying to drink the water. If you guys, no, Mika. Dramatic moment. Will the tech work? I know. So let me know if there's any audio problems. Hi, Veda. How are you? My cat's trying to drink the mosquito water. Um, so so here are the little mosquitoes that I have in this glass. You can see why they're called wrigglers. Whoops, there they are. And you can see their little head capsules. Happy Earth Day, which are super dark. Oh, there's an Earth Day award. I didn't know that. Cool. And somewhere in here, I think in my other no, in here. Oh, um, So, was my audio on? Okay. Autumn, do you see that? Do you see the pupa?
I can you switch it to the bigger screen, or can I do it to help?
Oh yeah, totally. I'm gonna take myself off. And I mean, I'll take off my computer
Oh, perfect.
and go like this. Yeah. So here's my cup of.
You found them just in time because they were pupating and getting ready to hatch off.
Oh really? Right.
Yeah, so that light colored one, that's a pupa, like sort
Cool.
of in the center.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right there.
And the pupa has two breathing apparati that are like this, and those are called trumpets.
That's such a
So
fun
rather
name.
than having a snorkel, they have two trumpets, and that's how they breathe. And they are actually mobile pupa, which is not a very common thing in the insect world. So if they're disturbed, they are comma shaped at rest, and then when they're disturbed, they wiggle their tail like this and move around to get away from predators.
I love the name trumpet. I'm I'm gonna pour them into this container here to look at them underneath the dissection scope, which will still be a little tricky because the depth of field will change as they wriggle up and down. But I think it might be fun to see them up close if possible. But yeah, I didn't realize how mobile they were. I was before we started the broadcast, I was talking with Autumn about them, and I was like, "Oh, I think I have two different species here," but it was not two different species necessarily. It was just um, the larvae and then the pupa. So it's nice to learn that from her. All right. This camera. Maybe I'll show you. Yay, okay. Can the pupa see? You have a question. Can the pupa see?
They can definitely see a difference in the light that changes, and that's most of the time movement or the change in light is why they move. But as far as like seeing like we see, no, I don't think so.
Yeah. Oops. I guess they don't really have. Sorry. Let me just switch this so that Autumn's bigger than me as I adjust this. If you guys have any other questions about mosquitoes, put them in the chat now since we're at about an hour.
Yeah.
So don't hold
I have
back.
another photo that I could share too.
Yeah.
This is a good photo that shows common backyard habitat. I don't know if I can make it bigger.
Oh yeah. So if you press one button, it'll get bigger.
Oh gosh.
Here, I got it.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'll figure it out when we're done.
Yeah.
So it shows some pretty common backyard habitats, such as uncovered boats, open trash cans, clogged gutters, bird baths, kids' toys, and tires. All of these things can hold water, and if they're holding water for 3 days or more, you can pretty much bet that there's going to be mosquito larvae in them.
So this is one way that people can effectively control mosquitoes in their own yard.
Absolutely, yes. And the more you do that in your own yard, the mosquitoes that commonly use this habitat are the ones that like to bite humans, and they usually only fly about 1,000 feet from where they hatched. So if you can keep them out of your yard and possibly your neighbors' yards, then you shouldn't have an issue with those mosquitoes.
Voila.
Mm-hmm.
So
that was good.
A good reason to talk to your neighbors about mosquitoes and what they're doing to help do their part in the neighborhood. The coordinated effort makes a big difference. So here we can make a bigger.
Figured it out.
Cool.
Yay!
Yeah, here are some of the little.
Yeah, they look great.
Excellent. Yeah, you can see What are the two little knobs in the front of their head? Are those their antenna?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
I'm trying to see if it's Japonicus like I thought, but it's a little tough to see. It might not be. It might. Where did this come out of?
This came
The
out, I'm in
habitat.
Ann Arbor, Michigan, and there's a bin of water in the front of the yard, which has been a bin of water since the fall.
Oh, geez.
So in the fall, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to get Autumn on the bug scope, and I have all these mosquitoes I could use to show her. And so I put the lid on it. I put the lid on, and I will say that the lid isn't totally secure, so it was less secure than I thought. Maybe because during the winter, maybe in the winter it expanded or whatever, and then there was a crack when I last found it.
Sometimes we have issues with rain barrels. People will have rain barrels to collect water off their roof. And most rain barrels have a lid to keep mosquitoes out, but if the lid doesn't fit just right, then that's what the rain barrel will look like.
There we go. I'm trying to find. There is a pupa over here. I'll try to zoom to it. It's at the surface of the water. Let's see. Did I go too high? Not too high. Oh, it's moved over actually. Definitely hard to track them because I don't want to scare them away as I move around. There it is.
When we look at larvae under the microscope to identify them, we usually stick them in a cup of hot water, and they actually kind of, so like when you cook a lobster and they turn red and they get stiff, that's kind of what happens with mosquito larvae too. So they stiffen out and they die, so then we can look at them better under the microscope.
That makes sense. Yeah. That's something that we do with the collection. One of the current ways to deal with caterpillars and things, you boil them before putting them in ethanol so that they maintain their structure and don't deflate completely, because that can be really helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Structure for ID. All right, I'm going to try to slowly go over to where the little beetle that got caught in here too. I'm slowly going back over to the larva, the pupa again. Okay, and then we do have a question in the chat from, no, it went down a little bit, from David asking, there it is, but it's wriggling around. Question from David asking, do the human affecting diseases that mosquitoes carry have any negative effects on the mosquitoes themselves?
So that's tough because I've read things that are pretty conflicting on that. I believe that for the most part, no. However, I have read that there are some instances where their fitness is reduced by the disease that they're carrying, because you have to keep in mind that in order for a mosquito to spread a disease, that pathogen has to multiply within that mosquito first.
Oh, so it needs to be some resources.
So it needs to be affected itself before it can then pass it on.
Mm-hmm. I see. Oh,
I think they are Japonicus.
Yeah. I wish the pupa would stay still.
It's, you know what, you can't do any IDs with pupa. I mean, you can, especially with Aedes, but honestly, I'm no good with pupa unless I have a key right in front of me.
Yeah, I'm curious to see them just because I think they look cool.
They are cool. I really think it's so neat how they move around. And I mean, typically pupal stages are just kind of, sedentary. Oh, look, there's some skins. See the skins of the larvae. Those are the larvae that have pupated. So when they molted into pupae, they kind of left those like ghost larvae behind.
Yeah, cool. They're the exuvia, and you can really see how the head capsules are pretty tough because you can see them really well, but then the rest of the body is very soft, so they just look like a ghost of what they were in a way. But yeah, this is the ones, mosquito wigs, says Frank. Yep. Here, I'll try to zoom in on one of these since these ones are pretty still. I wonder if they're tired or something. Or maybe they think they're camouflaged with the exuvia. Oops, the water needs to. Sorry for anyone who's sensitive to the movement. Here, I'll try to slowly move it over so we can
At
see.
the end there, where it looks like they have a fluffy butt,
Uh-huh.
that's there are hairs at the end, and within those hairs, it's kind of hard to see, but there are actually gills, and those gills will help them regulate the pressure between them and the water.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
It's tough to see. They're kind of clear. Oh, you can see them perfectly right
Oh, I
there.
see.
Yay.
Yeah. Like it's very faint, like just like an
Yeah.
outline, but where the
Yep.
hairs are. Oh, I see. You can see it's kind of like a damselfly larva, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are their gills. And I was looking, these ones aren't really doing it right now, but sometimes you can see them connect with the surface tension at the top with the
Mm-hmm.
hairs at the back, right? And then, so wait, why do they do, why do they hang out by the top if they have gills, I guess is my question.
So the gills are more to regulate the pressure between the water and themselves. So it's more of movement of water, but they have to breathe through the siphon at the end. So that's why they have to hang out by the top of the water. And that one right there that's on the scope in the
Yeah.
middle, you can see
Oh,
him
it's trying to
filtering
eat.
the water. Yeah, he's eating his buddy's head capsule now.
Scraping it for food. Yeah. I wonder if they're getting hungry since I've had them in this container for an hour now.
Could be.
Yeah. Well, baby wants a snack. Um, David's asking for the zoom on this. It's about 40x right now. 40x. Well, it says 33 on the scope, and then I think the eyepiece is like about 15 more. So they do look very cute, I will say. You can see their little eye, maybe, are they called stomata, maybe? Like they are with other immatures, like
I would just
ladybugs.
call them
Sorry,
eyes.
okay. Sorry for the shakiness, everyone. Yeah, eyes.
Oh, that is shaky.
Sorry, I'll make it go away for a moment. Ah, all right. Hopefully it's a little bit less shaky.
Frank asked
Yeah.
about the lifespan, and that depends on the species. Some species are very long lived, and other species tend to not be around for very long. The springtime mosquitoes that are getting ready to be a nuisance now, they tend to have one brood per year. So they tend to be pretty long lived because they want to make sure that they get as many eggs out there for next year as possible. Whereas some other species might only live for a couple of weeks. And those species probably have several generations in one year. And again, it's all species dependent.
Mm-hmm. I decided maybe I ought to just put the forceps in here to move them around, but it's tricky. They are kind of mesmerizing. It looks like we're looking through a kaleidoscope almost. Yeah. This one over. Do you know how many instars they have as larvae?
There are 4 larval instars before they pupate.
Okay.
After they hatch out of the egg, the first instar is pretty tiny, as you can imagine, and they're usually pretty clear.
Okay. For anyone wondering, instars are like the time between molts for insects, for bugs. All right, let me see if I can move this over. I did scare them all away with the forceps, unfortunately. Broke up the raft by accident. Cool. So this is this the new microscope? Not yet. I'll definitely like announce. Oh, here. I'll turn off my phone now. I think I forgot that I already have this going tuned. Yeah, hold on. All right, there we go. I think that dropped it. Oh, interesting. One sec. Let me just exit this.
Issa, your sound is off.
From Dallas. Yeah, so
Yay.
I think that will wrap up the broadcast now. What are you looking forward to this year when it comes to your work with mosquitoes? Oh, I have, sorry. There we go. Yeah.
Every year is so different that I kind of just look forward to seeing what's going to be new or what's going to be different.
Mhm.
And so, for example, last year, New Jersey, a couple of counties found a new species for New Jersey. Not a new
cool.
species for the region, but a new species for the state. So I'm hoping that we can find that in our county. And yeah, like I said, every season's different. So it's
Cool.
just kind of fun to sit back and be like, what's going to be fun this year? What's going to be different? What's going to be crazy?
Yeah, dynamic. Yeah, cool. Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks so much for joining us today. How can we find you and connect with you if
I
people
am
have
on
more
Twitter.
questions?
I am on Twitter, and it's just at my name, so at Autumn Angelus. I'll put it in the comments. And other than that, I don't have Facebook or anything like that, so I can't connect with you that way. But just find me on Twitter. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of.
All right.
And it won't let me comment. Oh, there it goes.
I guess if there's any last
Yeah.
things that people ought to know about mosquitoes before we head off too.
Oh my gosh. My computer's being extremely slow.
Oh, that's okay.
Oh gosh. And it autocorrected.
Here. I think I pushed the program.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, thanks so much. There was so much great info that you shared with us today. I know I
And
learned a
other
lot about
David.
mosquitoes. And for some reason, like I can't comment in the chat right now. For some reason I can't see the bottom of it on my screen. I don't know why.
Yeah,
But
mine was being goofy too. That was where I was having issues, but
oh,
it's in there
okay.
now. So
Okay.
come and find
Also,
me, and I'm like super ready to answer questions. I love getting questions about mosquitoes, and even if I don't know, there's a ton of people that I'm connected with that would know the answer. So, and no, I don't have a website. I'm sorry. I'm not that interesting.
no, this was great and this was really thrilling and you have your Twitter. That's your website. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's the way to contact Autumn for more info and yeah. Any last things that you want to share about mosquitoes before we sign off?
I just want to say huge, huge, huge thank you to you, Issa. I had a lot of fun, and I guess I just hope that everybody might look at mosquitoes a little bit differently the next time they have one land on them or see one while they're outside.
Cool.
They're not all ugly.
Yeah. I'll also give everyone a bug scope challenge to find a male mosquito this summer. I challenge you to find a male mosquito. Yeah. Look by the flowers, I suppose. Maybe that's the easiest way to find one. I don't know. But yeah. Cool. I'm trying to think about what shall I do with these mosquitoes now. I almost kind of want to keep them and feed them for a little bit, and then maybe I'll
I would
put
just
them
get
in the
rid of the
freezer.
pupa.
Get rid of the pupa.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they don't hatch out.
And
Yeah.
then if you want to keep them, if you want to like maybe keep some in a
Definitely.
vial, if you put them in
Yeah.
ethanol, they'll get weird. But if so, we usually have a mixture of alcohol, acetic acid, and glycerin, and that keeps their bodies plump while we're
Oh,
storing them. So you could
okay.
use that. Mhm.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. Cheers, everyone. Cheers. Thank you, Autumn. So great to have you. I
Cheers.
learned so much. And
Thank you again. And
yeah,
thank you,
thank
everybody.
you. Yeah, have a good evening.
You too.
Bye.